Jason, I think you can get started.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jason Landrum, a program director at the Blue Convergence Fund, and I'm joined by my colleague, Emily Knight, who is the BCF's Outreach and Communications Director. We're excited to have you here to launch BCF's Ocean Biodiversity program. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. Everybody is muted to minimize any background noise during the webinar. The webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with folks who couldn't join us today, and it will be posted on our BCF website for reference after the webinar. There will be a short Q&A session at the end of today's presentation, so be sure to enter your questions in the dedicated Q&A section in Zoom. We will be tracking the chat, but to ensure we see your question, please use the Q&A area. And please follow the chat box for any relevant links that we'll share during the presentation. Also, we want to hear from you. So at this moment and any time after, please drop your name, affiliation, and where you're calling in from today into the chat now. So for today's agenda, we planned to provide a brief introduction to us, the Blue Convergence Fund, or BCF. And then we're going to introduce our Ocean Biodiversity Program with some information about the background and context, where we're headed, what we plan to do, with a specific emphasis on our listen, support, and engage approach. And then we'll cover a timeline of upcoming events and opportunities that folks will want to take notes on. And then we'll finish with that short Q&A session that I mentioned earlier for the webinar participants. So to start us off, Blue Convergence Fund, BCF, is a philanthropic initiative created to support use-inspired science in coastal and ocean communities. Our mission is to ensure knowledge is co-designed, communicated, and ultimately considered in decision-making. To meet our mission, we focus on being intentional and strategic when scoping interest areas and geographies. We customize our grant making to meet the express needs of communities, managers, practitioners, and decision makers. And we provide resources and guidance that facilitate outreach and communications for project results and impact. The fund organizes its work through topical programs, including the Ocean Biodiversity, which we are introducing today. And we also have another program titled Climate Resilient Fisheries, both of which are described on our website. And we'll drop that into the chat for everybody. So to start our conversation off today, I thought we'd just put a picture out there and talk a little bit about ocean biodiversity. When we think of ocean biodiversity, maybe something like this picture comes to mind. From the bottom of the seafloor and through the water column to the surface of the ocean, we see a dizzying array of organisms. All of these organisms together represent entire ecosystems, each contributing in their own way to its health and stability. And although it's tough to see in this static picture, these diverse organisms are often strongly interconnected. Given the complexity in these types of systems, however, it's historically been difficult to define, measure, and sustainably steward ocean biodiversity, especially with management and stewardship practices that operate at various spatial scales and across diverse communities and policy contexts. So let's get a little bit more personal with this. As representative as the previous image might be for depicting ocean biodiversity, it lacks context and perspective. Ocean biodiversity doesn't quite look like that everywhere and to everyone. Different habitats and species are often unique to specific places. Also, ocean biodiversity is commonly defined and understood through diverse lenses, values, and knowledge systems, as reflected from different communities across the United States and elsewhere in the world. So, in some of the photos in this collage, that diversity of place and perspective are representative. Some of us see biodiversity as part of our natural heritage, culture, or origins. Others see it as reflected in the breadth of different types of organisms found in the ocean, some of which aren't found anywhere else. Some view it through the lens of specific species of concern, whether they be threatened or just super cool. Others see it as a source of food and or livelihoods, while others view ocean biodiversity through their experiences with nature, whether that be fishing, snorkeling, scuba diving, surfing, kayaking, or canoeing. So if ocean biodiversity looks different in different places and between different people, how can we share those perspectives, observations, and knowledge to steward it sustainably? This is this is where we started pondering. This is what we started pondering years ago with the central guiding question: how can our shared knowledge of ocean biodiversity frame and inform our decisions about how it's managed, stewarded, and restored? Across these different perspectives that we just saw in the previous collage, and through conversations we've had over the years, there is a common agreement around ocean biodiversity that we've observed. One, it's an incredible display of the variety of life in the ocean, and it's vital for the planet's health and well-being. And we've also observed there's a common thread and a common agreement that its management, stewardship, and restoration should be guided by the best available science and knowledge. As such, it represents the living foundation for natural heritage, well-being, and resilience across America, weaving value from the local level all the way up to the country scale, connecting all of us. At the community level, diverse ocean life underpins cultural identity, food security, livelihoods, and safety and prosperity. At the national level, it bolsters the country's ecological health, food systems, economy, national security, and resilience. From fisheries and blue economy sectors to subsistence and cultural heritage to disaster resilience and recovery. But what but while ocean biodiversity functions as a shared national asset, it's not treated such in policy and practice. There exists no federal mandate that establishes ocean biodiversity stewardship as a primary national objective. Instead, decisions are guided by sectoral laws such as sanctuaries, monuments, some in the fisheries management space, or individual species conservation. There exists ample knowledge, but there remain huge silos. There's huge gaps in sharing what we know and bringing that knowledge to decisions on the water. As such, this backdrop creates a challenging landscape to steward ocean biodiversity holistically and to apply what we know about diverse ocean life to decision making from local to national perspectives and all the points in between. That's not to say that we haven't seen advancements over the past several decades, both on the science side as well as in terms of informing actions and decisions with knowledge. We've indeed seen progress, especially over the past 5 to 10 years. One outcome of note was the release of the National Ocean Biodiversity Strategy last year. Thus, there's plenty of past work to build upon. So we aren't recreating the wheel, and instead we're building on the gaining momentum and aiming to help unlock knowledge to help with decision making, something that many are calling for. In fact, the National Ocean Biodiversity Strategy called out a key existing need that deserves more attention across all groups of experts, managers, practitioners, and rights holders, which is to make better use of existing knowledge and prioritize the acquisition of new biodiversity knowledge to enable better policy and management decisions. This call to action highlights that despite decades of data acquisition and technological advances, information about ocean biodiversity remains underutilized in day-to-day decision-making across America. Thus, we're trying to enter this call at a critical time when more engagement and actionable science can have an oversized positive impact on biodiversity. So, with this background in mind, where are we headed? We started by setting an impact vision or North Star for our ocean biodiversity program to help guide where we'd like to end up in the future as aligned with what we can do to reach it. To that, we envision a future where the United States stewards ocean biodiversity as a national asset, an asset that supports the country's prosperity and resilience, and that's led by communities, grounded in co-designed knowledge, and that produces equitable outcomes. Although we've made progress, challenges still remain in attaining this vision, especially as it pertains to empowering communities directly and connecting them with each other to use collective knowledge to inform ocean biodiversity governance at all levels. The good news is there's a lot of great groups and previous and ongoing work that offer a foundation to build upon. The opportunity here is to advance work together that helps carve a more structured and cohesive path towards stewarding ocean biodiversity as a national asset through the voices and knowledge of communities directly. And of course, this vision is not something that we can do by ourselves. It requires communication, coordination, and engagement among the many different communities and institutions. And while we contribute to this vision in our own way, we hope that contribution is aligned and complemented through engagement and action by others. We want this body of work to be inclusive. So please reach out to us, whether you're a funder, a tribe, government agency, researcher, industry representative, or other, to align and find ways to complement in our contributions to this vision. So let's get a little bit more into the specifics about where we are and what we hope to contribute towards our impact vision for this program. So our intent here is to unblock existing knowledge or illuminate new insights that improve decision making for people and nature. In terms of geographic scope, we're going to start in the US and its territories and build therein, but we have plans to expand internationally over time. In terms of governance, we plan to work at the scale where subnational policies and decisions are being implemented, whether they be at the county, state, or regional level, with the intent to support where people and ecosystems actually experience the effect of those decisions on the water in specific communities and places. That's to say, we're interested in empowering communities to bring their knowledge to inform coastal resilience plans, marine protected area management plans, fisheries regulations, shoreline and in-water permits, or other management instruments or tools that shape on the water outcomes. In terms of communities, we are centering community-led priorities to identify the management and stewardship decisions facing the greatest need. For us, community-led means that communities actively shape the agenda, approach, and impact pathways for proposed work, not just providing input, but leading from the beginning. Communities could be groups of people or organizations who are directly affected by or actively engaged with ocean and coastal decisions, and they hold knowledge that can inform those decisions. This can include local communities such as residents, neighborhoods, estuaries, shorelines, and working waterfronts. Could be tribal or indigenous communities. It could be working communities whose livelihoods depend on the ocean and coast, such as fishing communities, port and harbor workers, tourism-dependent communities. Also, community-based organizations are often involved in this. Local nonprofits, grassroots groups, climate-resistant groups, and justice. And there's also local governance actors, such as municipalities and counties and conservation districts that comprise this group of communities. We want to be able to be open for all those communities to engage with these resources in this plan. So we want to meet the central need. What we plan to do. We want to meet a central need that has emerged from all of our conversations over the years, and that's really to support more engagement that leads to actionable science. To do that, we plan to support the development of the development of a collection of case studies that illuminate how communities can bring diverse collective knowledge to address on the water challenges in specific places and decision-making contexts. We're looking to support projects that reflect the diverse issues facing communities thriving with diverse ocean life across America, and showcase their effective approaches that they're employing to address key issues by using that collective knowledge. While these individual case studies will solve real-world problems in discrete places as collective group of examples, they can effectively become a living library of what works, where, and why. And more importantly, as a group of case studies, they can offer insights that provide a learning conduit from the community level and upwards into state, regional, and national governance frameworks. To do this, we also plan to establish an Ocean Life Knowledge to Action Network platform that will allow project teams to share and learn amongst each other and to investigate linkages with other places and people. My colleague Emily will describe this a bit more very soon, and I'll leave it to that. A little bit more about the case studies. They're going to be drawn from multiple ecoregions in the US, as you can see illustrated in the map on this slide. Case studies will be defined by local decision points and contexts alongside the existing knowledge needs sources and on-ramps to inform those decisions. We're going to start with 3 locations mentioned here, the Chesapeake Bay, Puget Sound, and Mobile Bay, but we intend to scope new areas moving forward. We think that supporting these case studies in different parts of the US will contribute to making knowledge more actionable, comparable, and transferable. And the plan is to support a representative set of case studies in the US and to capture those diverse experiences and decision contexts across America. So we will be continuously scoping this area. And if you don't work in these initial locations, please stay tuned and engaged, as we might be working in your neck of the woods soon. Okay, for each location, we have a plan. And our plan is to follow 3 simple verbs: listen, support, and engage. We'll do this in each location, but first we want to listen. We want to mobilize community voices through listening sessions and other convenings to scope those needs and cultivate relationships therein. Next, we plan to build off that support We plan to build off that listening with support by issuing open funding opportunities that target projects and people that advance our understanding of how ocean biodiversity knowledge can shape more equitable and sustainable decisions. And throughout this process, we'll engage by catalyzing knowledge to action across funded projects through strategic outreach and engagement. So let's go a little bit more in depth into each part of this approach. As I mentioned above, we want to continue to learn and listen. And quite frankly, we've been listening for the better part of a decade. But of course, there's always more to learn and to share. So BCF will be hosting virtual listening sessions that offer a platform to identify local challenges facing ocean biodiversity and discuss how to tackle those challenges through collective knowledge and action. These virtual listening sessions will be public, and their main purpose is to provide an engagement opportunity or to provide engagement opportunities to identify and discuss concrete needs and opportunities, and to unlock and opportunities and potential solutions to unlock knowledge for evidence-based decision making in these specific areas. Of course, while they are primarily for communities to engage and discuss potential needs and case studies, they will also feed into our scoping process and inform future funding opportunities. BCF will also be issuing a request for information survey that it will send out broadly to interested parties who would like to weigh in on these topics within these regions. So if you can attend these virtual listening sessions, we know folks are busy, we know people are on the water or they have jobs. Don't fear, we've got another opportunity through that RFI where you can contribute to the conversation. Transitioning to support. So after listening, we want to be able to support. To do this, we plan to release a request for proposals in next March, that offers resources for communities to convene and to identify specific decision contexts and knowledge needs and develop tangible approaches to solve real-world problems associated with ocean biodiversity management, stewardship, and restoration. The initial focus will be on facilitating engagement among different communities to increase greater availability and access of existing knowledge to inform decision-making. Some example of engagement needs that we've heard over the years are breaking barriers or silos that impede knowledge to action, elevating traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge or local ecological knowledge or other underrepresented knowledge systems and sources, repairing upstream and downstream disconnect where upstream activities have a negative downstream consequences, and more. These opportunities will be provided through open calls for grant proposals to develop these concrete case studies. And as a reminder, case studies identify discrete decision points, facilitate collaborative engagement to mobilize the best available knowledge to inform those decisions. And some of the outcomes we're hoping for here is essentially the building of a cohort of case studies that illuminate how communities can bring that knowledge, that collective knowledge, to on-the-water challenges in specific places and decision-making contexts. And again, individually, they will showcase impact on the water in local specific places, but collectively they can act as a living library and has the potential to shape evidence-based management and stewardship practice beyond those localities and towards that impact vision of a national asset. Given that we're going to target case studies that address challenges within different management topical areas, or as we call them, kind of decision families, including a few that are listed here, such as fisheries management, existing protected areas, permitting, siting, and restoration planning. To provide a couple of illustrative examples to show what case study projects might address under these decision families, let's target fisheries management and existing protected areas in a couple of examples. One, for fisheries management, on the US West Coast, managers use biodiversity science, things like stock assessments, maps of where overfished rockfish were most at risk, to carve out rockfish conservation areas. Those zones were closed to trawl fishing to give vulnerable species a chance to recover while leaving other areas open so fishing fleets could still work. It wasn't an easy process and required a lot of engagement and a lot of knowledge. Fishing communities, managers, and conservation groups had to negotiate real trade-offs, and fleets set up co-ops and bycatch pools so they could share data and manage risks together. It's an example where biodiversity knowledge is needed, shared, and used to protect sensitive species while also keeping a viable fishery going. One example that I can offer from the existing protected areas, and again, these are just illustrative examples on the types of projects that these case studies will embody under these decision families. For the existing protected areas along the Central California coast, both Western and Indigenous knowledge highlight just how special the waters around Point Concepcion are. Huge productivity, kelp forests, marine mammals, sea turtles, and important cultural sites. In 2024, that work led to the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, first tribally nominated sanctuary protecting more than 4,500 square miles. Sanctuary was designed to safeguard biodiversity and cultural heritage under co-stewardship model with tribal partners, and it represents an area where tribal and local knowledge are elevated to guide management decisions, and where different knowledge systems, both from Western traditions and traditional traditions of knowledge, can work in tandem to help meet its blended ecological and cultural goals. So, with that, I would like to pass it over to my colleague Emily Knight to talk more about our engage portion of our overall approach. Emily, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. And thank you all for joining us here today to learn about this new program that Blue Convergence Fund is launching. And I'm really happy to be able to share with you. So one thing that just to kind of give some context for the organization is when Blue Convergence Fund funds new projects, we also provide outreach and engagement capacity from our team to help our grantees connect to those that can use either the information they're producing or to share lessons learned or insights that might be applicable in other places. And of course, ocean biodiversity will not be um, will not be an exception to that. So it's something that comes as part of our funding. As Jason mentioned, these are engagement grants that we seek to fund in these three case study regions. So there will be engagement built into the grant itself, but then there will also be the possibility to collaborate with our team to develop regional outreach and engagement strategies that really complement the engagement strategies that are already built into the grant. And the idea will be to try to help grantees strengthen connections with decision makers, as well as promoting the projects more broadly across the region with other states and also at the national level. We also will do work in the context of these regional outreach and engagement strategies to really do a lot of audience analyses to understand what the existing context is, how best to plug in, and how best to implement outreach tactics that meet people where they are. We also want to share the outcomes of these case studies more broadly. As Jason mentioned, we want to kind of build this family of case studies that demonstrates how communities on the ground can make progress on their priorities and their challenges, and then to be able to share that across the regions, nationally, and as well as just publicly. And then we also want to use these strategies to craft the narrative around engagement around the engagement grants as case studies. What is the story of each project? What were the insights? What were the lessons learned? What worked and what didn't work? And how do we then share that out through outreach tactics that are relevant to different audiences? So you can go to the next slide, Jason. And then another piece that Jason previously mentioned is we want to establish an ocean life knowledge to action network. And through this network, we want to create a platform and venues that connect the project teams to each other, both those working within Chesapeake Bay or within Puget Sound and elsewhere. And we also want to share lessons learned between each of these regions, including as we add regions to the portfolio. And then elevate the project teams that are working on the ground to higher levels of decision making to try to build a ground up voice from communities to bring more attention to their resource needs and the solutions they think are most relevant. And just create a sharing space where we can find common ground as well as honor the unique differences between projects and regions. Go to the next slide. To get in on a little bit more on what exactly the network is, we do not see ourselves as creating this whole new community of practice to layer on top of all of the connections that may already exist. The role of BCF with the network will be to be a connector of dots. So through our audience analyses, we want to understand what existing communities of practice exist. What are the working groups? What is the decision-making context around each project? And then be able to connect people to each other who wouldn't otherwise have the capacity or support to connect, but maybe should. And so the network goal will be to function as kind of a network of networks. And we've already sort of started scoping like what communities exist out there in each of the three existing regions. And so how the network will start is once we have supported grantees and projects, the network will start essentially as a grantee network for them and their partners. And then with additional scoping, we would build it out over time. In terms of what the network would do, the activities could be a number of engagement opportunities. What we want to do is follow the need. Is there a need for people in Mobile Bay to meet together in person, as part of the network? Virtual gatherings, webinars. Some of that will come out of the scoping and our greater understanding of our audiences and how they want to be connected and how they want to be communicated with. And so the outcomes of the network, we hope, are to break down silos that simply exist because everybody is busy and can't always do the engagement that is necessary. We also want to rely on conversations with the network to craft the narrative of this program, to create a shared understanding of what ocean biodiversity means to us as communities, as a country, and also how we move forward in telling a story about people and nature and their special places and the species and the plants that they love. And then lastly, we want to build momentum behind the case studies. As outcomes, occur, we really want to ensure we are sharing it broadly, especially as the program potentially expands to new regions and that people can learn lessons from each other and insights and also just have a space where they feel like they can hash out anything that they might be struggling with or something they think is working really well. Often that space isn't created, and we're all sort of working in our corners, and we don't necessarily get the chance to see each other. And by seeing each other, we can also see that we can also come to recognize that there is a lot of progress that we can make. There's a lot we can do, and we don't have to feel alone with any of our problems or our challenges, which are very real, we recognize, but there's also a ton of opportunity. So I will now turn it back to Jason to kind of round us out.
Wonderful. Thanks, Emily. And so just wanted to transition to our current timeline. So a lot of you are paying attention and know that we've got some upcoming things, but we wanted to put some dates and some times on some of those sessions coming up. First, we'd like to talk about the virtual listening sessions. We will have three different listening sessions in late January that we focus on those initial geographies that we talked about. January 21st will be a listening session on focus on Chesapeake Bay. January 26th will be a listening session focused on Mobile Bay. And then January 28th, we'll have a session on Puget Sound. In the background, we will release that RFI, that request for information survey, so that it will be available for a month. The contributions to that will be open in January 15th, and we'll give it a month that close on February 15th. All of this will be followed by requests for proposals for those engagement grants. These are some tentative dates, but they will probably hold true. But the RFP will open in March 2nd of next year. We will host an informational webinar just a couple of days afterwards to answer any specific questions about that offering and that competition. And then it's going to close on April 1st, 2026, and that is no joke. And then we're going to focus on, we just like to say that this is just the beginning. This is the launch of this program. And so while we will have some initial work to be done in these three specific regions, and we have that RFP that for engagement grants in those regions. I did mention we are going to be scoping new regions, so we're going to focus on these three regions and have those project launches and continue to develop our program outreach as Emily described and as needed through those projects and through the broader network. We're also going to expand across the United States. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be scoping new regions or new areas to work in. And so we're going to hopefully get some feedback from this community and other communities out there interested in this to understand where those opportunities are and where those greatest needs are. And then we do have plans to expand this program out internationally. And much of that work is going to develop and evolve over time. We also plan on developing other additional pillars of work and support within this program. And so those are still in process, but we really wanted to hit the ground running with our initial core work of case studies and building networks and building out towards a representative set of case studies in the US that can be really impactful on the ground. But we do recognize that there are other enabling conditions and other catalytic moments that we might be able to put together to help support that body of work, but also to expand its scope and to essentially facilitate greater knowledge uptake and use for decision making around ocean biodiversity stewardship. So with that, we did want to acknowledge some of the folks that have made this all possible. I wanted to acknowledge the Paul M. Angel Foundation, as well as the Volganel Foundation, who has made